Hello, salutations. What to do with Stop the Gamer off out of Durag Game and no vibes like scrap. Let's get it. Happy Wednesday, Durag Nation. We are back once again. This time for a very special stream. You know, we like to do this sometimes for certain new releases. It is all about the Stellar Blade. This is Stellar Blade week. The game releases everywhere on Friday. And today is the first day reviews are allowed to be published. We are about 30 minutes away from the review embargo lifting, so people will be allowed to share their reviews. A bunch of games journalists got the game early, and they'll be sharing new footage and their full reviews of the game, and we'll be seeing the Metacritic score to go along with that as well. What's up, No Cap? Aunt DC? What's up, Lil Cowboy? How is everyone doing? So we're going to be enjoying the festivities. We're obviously big fans of Stellar Blade in Durag Nation. I played the demo a lot. Big fan of it. I'm streaming live on both YouTube and Twitch for this special day. So shout out to everyone hanging out this morning. What's up, Gary Boy? Over on the Twitch side, appreciate you. How you doing, No Cap? Are you also a Stellar Blade enjoyer? Did you get your pre-order secured? WRC Gaming. Yep. That sums it up. So what are we thinking? Metacritic score predictions. Where are we thinking this is going to line up? So I think it's definitely fair to say Stellar Blade is the Hogwarts Legacy of 2024, if you know what that means. So I think there's definitely a cap on how high the reviews are going to get for Stellar Blade, no matter how good it is. Because I definitely don't think they're going to allow this to be a Game of the Year contender. I don't think they're going to go as far as they did with Hogwarts Legacy and keep it out of the award consideration altogether. But this definitely is shaping up to be one of those situations where the players are going to probably, for the most part, have some very different opinions from the games journalists. So I think Stellar Blade more likely is going to be in like the 82 to 85 range, maybe 86. I don't think Stellar Blade hits 90. No way. I think it's going to be under 90. I think there are definitely going to be some outlets that give it a 9 out of 10 or higher. For sure. It is a really good game. Just based on what I played of the demo. But I know there's definitely going to be some outlets that give it like a 6 or a 5 or something for, political reasons. So I'm factoring in how many of those type of reviews are going to lower the overall score. That's how I'm landing firmly in the 80 range. I don't think it drops below 80. I think a similar game, Lies of P, which also had a demo, which I played. I think Stellar Blade was much better than that. And that fell in with a 82 user score and a 80 critic score on Metacritic. I feel like Stellar Blade will be like 82 to 87 range. What's up, Captay? Listen to the reviews of what I saw they just dropped a new Stellar Blade outfit earlier. Someone was sharing a little bit from their review copy, and holy, a lot of people are going to be practicing using their controller with one hand. Actually, having played the demo, I don't even think it's possible to play like the boss fights with one hand. So you're going to need to, save that for the exploration, your base where where she's sitting around, listening to music. I think there's going to be a lot of game time devoted to her either sitting in a chair, standing in one spot, or climbing up and down ladders. I think I think there's going to be an unusual amount of play activity related to those three things. What's my favorite thing about Stellar Blade? Definitely, I think the combat. Like when I played it, it was, obviously there are going to be some people that say, the attractiveness of the characters, but even though that's refreshing, that's not going to sell your game. It's going to help, but it's not going to determine if your game is good or not. And to me, it was going to be about the gameplay regardless. And I like that they make kind of a Soulsy game, but more in line with a Sekiro. Because one thing I don't like about certain Souls type games is when like the combat is super stiff and awkward. I really enjoy combat that's, flashy and cool and has a lot of variety and mobility, like you would get in like a Devil May Cry or a Bayonetta. I appreciate that a lot more. Even like a Final Fantasy 16, but with like a more of a skill ceiling, because Final Fantasy 16 had really flashy combat, but it was like super easy. So just from the demo, I like how they've kind of struck a balance between making a game that kind of can scratch the itch of those Sekiro type of enjoyers, while also making it more accessible and flashy for people who like more stylish and combat and cool combat. There's a surprising amount of depth. Like you can't just smash one button over and over again to clear these boss encounters. You have to actually, take your time, analyze their moves and attack patterns. And then it's not even enough to just randomly spam your special abilities. You also have to consider which special ability to use, because as you'll find in that special boss encounter, every special ability that you have doesn't just automatically interrupt the opponent, and it also doesn't give you immunity of any kind. So you do have to like pick your spots wisely when you're using one of those special moves. And I appreciate that. They try to avoid it. They try to avoid making the combat brainless while also not doing that thing where they kind of limit the character too much in order to make it more difficult. So I think a lot more people are going to enjoy this. Between this and the First Descendant, the one hand allegations ain't escaping. Oh, for sure. At least First Descendant though has, a lot of male characters too. They give you a little balance. First Descendant has Cake, but it also has, what would you call it? I guess steak. It has cake and steak. So it's got a little something for everybody. And I think the biggest appeal for First Descendant would definitely be the gameplay as well, the co-op gameplay. Cake and tanks. It has to be food related. That's why I went with steak, because it also rhymes with cake. You got the bakery and the steakhouse working in harmony. Dinner and dessert. That's how First Descendant worked. Stellar Blade is pretty much all bakery. That's This is Bakery the game. So in about 20 minutes, reviews are going live. What do you think IGN is going to give it? I think IGN, since it's a Sony exclusive, I think IGN kind of doesn't go too crazy, especially after the backlash they got from that France article. I think they play it safe and go like 80. I think they're gonna have DLC. They're definitely having there will definitely be paid DLC for Stellar Blade, and I believe the specific DLC is going to be like crossovers. So I think I heard something about a near crossover DLC with like 2B potentially coming to the game. But there will definitely be DLC for Stellar Blade. There will be more Bakery on the way. If you didn't have your fill with the main game, there will definitely be more. I believe it also has a New Game Plus as well. Want to play so badly? You can play the demo right now. I highly recommend it. It is a free demo, and the demo's great. I play the demo every day just to hone my skills in that special boss fight. No doubt, no Diddy, you need you to change your Twitch phrase from "I'm y'all's." Never. I'll never change it. I will be in your walls forever. Let's see. We got a first-time chatter over on the Twitch side promoting their product or services. No Diddy. No Diddy, but I am in those walls. Yeah. We don't do that here. I appreciate my entrepreneurs. But yeah, don't be dropping in promoting your fake like and engagement service. Shout out to people over there on Twitch. Yes, sir. Yeah, Don over on Twitch was just saying how much he loves my Twitch phrase. He just loves the idea that I'm just always in the walls. Just lurking in his walls. No Diddy. If you're following on Twitch, I will always be in the walls. I'm definitely going to do another Twitch stream. I've been slacking on Twitch the last week or so, looking for something to stream because Suicide Squad ain't it right now. But I think I'm gonna definitely stream Stellar Blade. I have to stream that because I'm supposed to be getting a copy. And I also downloaded Fallout 4. It was free in the PlayStation Store. So I'm gonna do a first time Fallout stream. See what all the fuss is about. Because I really enjoyed the show a lot. So I'm definitely looking to dive into the lore. Play the game for myself. Telltale's the Wakanda game? Yeah, I've heard everyone say that was pretty good. Yeah, they ain't sent me a copy. I don't usually do Metroidvania type games, but I would have played it for the culture. Is that a Hot Toys product? I wish I had a Eve figure that looked like this. Though some would call her a product. Nah, I don't have any Hot Toys. None. The one Hot Toy, they're just so egregiously expensive sometimes, and there's like a wait list. The one Hot Toy I just in general just don't collect toys anymore, but the one Hot Toy I was definitely tempted to buy was the symbiote Spider-Man from Spider-Man 2. That was fire. I was definitely thinking about getting that. Yo, Suicide, thanks for playing something different. I mean, I always play different stuff. It's just a matter of I'm not going to just play something if there's like nothing to do or nothing that's interesting. So that's why I'll go through phases where I stream Suicide Squad when there's new content or when there's like Twitch drops. And then when the content dries up, I just move on to something else. Yeah, I always cover different games on the channel. Always have. Because I've always had different interests. Even though like my YouTube channel started with Avengers, technically, my first game on the channel was Outriders. You know? So I quickly embraced the idea of not sticking to one game, and it served me well so far. Yep, we're going to, so I'm telling you, we're going to watch some of these review videos, you know, see what the impressions are, and then we'll keep a track of the Metacritic score. To see where Stellar Blade is landing. I'm predicting it's definitely going to be in the 80s. I don't think it goes below 70. What's up, Deeper? So you got one Hot Toy. Maybe you got those are definitely for fanboys. Those are just outrageous. Some of those Hot Toy prices are just outrageous. Jiggle effects, a lot of that in Stellar Blade for sure. Am I getting Sandland? I'll eventually get Sandland. I just have so many games to go through, and I still haven't finished I haven't even started the Sandland series. I wanted to watch the anime and read the manga. So was it right after Rip? I know Stellar Blade is going to get, so the obvious things about Stellar Blade that some journalists are going to criticize are the jiggle physics and the fact that it has attractive characters. That's going to be a sticking point. I think some outlets are going to be more overt about that bias, while others may try to dance around it to make it not seem so obvious that they're just hating on the game because the main character is hot. But there's definitely going to be a lot of that. I would hope that they would just stick to the merits of the game, you know, focus on the story, the combat, the graphics, you know, the performance. But these aren't the times we live in. Because I feel like I don't know about story. I only got, you know, through the demo, so story is not too crazy so far, but the performance was fantastic. Ran super smooth, graphics really good, and not just for culture reasons, like legitimately the graphics, the environments, the art style, the facial designs, top tier, very good. Looks Definitely looks like a very polished game. I really enjoyed the combat, especially when you get to the special boss encounter and they give you a bunch more stuff to work with on the skill tree. It really opens the game up. Am I getting Star Wars Outlaws? I'm in the Ubisoft content creator program. So I get early access to all the Ubisoft games, which will include Star Wars Outlaws. So I'll definitely have some coverage of that when it comes out in August. She's not a real girl, but she is based on a real girl. And yeah, they did some mocap for her, and holy, the model that Eve is based on, whew, they did capture for her. Holy. See, about 8 minutes away from the embargo. I'll pull up the Stellar Blade Metacritic score. Keep tabs on it. I'm predicting like an 85. I'm gonna go 85. If it barks like a dog and walks like one, if you know, you know. So this will be for the medic, for the meta. We'll just keep that open. Keep tabs on it. Outlaws looks good. From what I'm hearing, Outlaws sounds good. Obviously, people are going to be mad at it for various reasons. I think in this case, the culture war reasons to hate on Outlaws are pretty stupid. But I was reading one of the previews talking about how the space combat works and the space exploration. It sounds better than Starfield. Like a lot of that is what I was expecting from Starfield. Sounds like it's going to be more, and because we already saw a sample, like it's seamless takeoff. You go into the ship, you take off through atmosphere, and then you're in space. But you're going to be able to fly around, exploring outer space. There's going to be, fights you can get into. There's going to be, different planets to explore, side missions and different objectives you can find while going through space. It sounds really good. But you know, it's Ubisoft, so people are always going to have their takes. And to be fair, when people saw the season pass and the $130 version of the game, they're like, "Whoa!" It is definitely pricey. Season pass. Got to buy that special edition to get access to those other missions. One that includes Jabba the Hutt. So I feel like the real valid complaints are definitely so far kind of the pricing model, but you know it is what it is. It's Ubisoft. You know they're going to find a way to make sure that they make their money back on the game, even if it's single player. So season pass. It's funny, everything they accuse people accuse EA of being with their games. If you actually been playing EA games in like the last decade and Ubisoft games, most of the stuff they're accusing people accuse EA of doing is literally just what Ubisoft is doing. Like every game is like super optimized from Ubisoft for monetization. It's got season pass, it's got current premium currency, microtransactions, skins to sell. Like it's got all that, and even in games that you think wouldn't be. Like when I saw Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, I thought that's just going to be okay, a basic single player open world game. And like, nope, you got a season pass, you got DLC, you got a store, you got skins for sale, gear for sale, you got some co-op thrown in there. And now with Outlaws, you got the season pass, the premium editions. Is like, whereas EA, they just give you the game. Like there's just nothing with it. What's up, Bruno? Appreciate you. They show, yep. Well, Ubisoft, we're getting closer to summer, so Ubisoft is going to have their showcase that they do annually now. Their Ubisoft specific showcase. Some leaks came out from Tom Henderson about Assassin's Creed Hex. That's basically their witch game. It sounds pretty cool. Definitely sounds something very different from Assassin's Creed. Yeah, there's like 20 Assassin's Creed related games in development. So we're going to get more of that as we get into Summer Game Fest season. They're going to have like a whole showcase. So we'll see a little more Star Wars Outlaws, and they'll give us a look at more of those Assassin's Creed titles that they have cooking up. I'm actually really looking forward to Assassin's Creed Hex. That sounds cool. I like the idea of playing with like a witch character with witch power. I heard one of the abilities allows you to possess things. So I'm definitely looking forward to checking it out. I still didn't finish Mirage. And Mirage was fun. But yeah, I haven't played Assassin's Creed games since like the first one. Mirage, I think, legitimately was my first Assassin's Creed game I played since Assassin's Creed 1. I just never really got super into the series after that. But Hex just generally, that's why I'm surprised Hex wasn't just an original IP. I understand why they made an Assassin's Creed game, because, you know, the Assassin's Creed brand has a lot of recognition. So there are people who will just check it out because it's Assassin's Creed. But that definitely sounds like something fresh. Like I like the idea of like something super different. Was there a closed alpha? I'm not sure. I was hearing from based on the Tom Henderson article, it sounded like Hex was still kind of early in development. I think he said they're targeting like a 2026 release date. But the one closed alpha I'm definitely looking forward to is Marvel Rivals. Well, I'm not going to be participating, but because I don't have a PC, but I'm looking forward to hearing more about it and seeing more. All right. The Stellar Blades reviews are up. So let's start with IGN. Let's see where IGN falls. Let me pull it up. Okay. Got the first Stellar Blade reviews. We'll start with IGN because I'm curious where they land on this. I'm predicting an 8. 7 or 8. They're not going to trash it like they did Suicide Squad because it's a Sony game. But I'm thinking 7 or 8 from IGN. I know ideology-wise, there's definitely going to be pushback within IGN to trash it, but they avoided doing that with Hogwarts Legacy. You know, people wanted them to just destroy Hogwarts Legacy, and they didn't. So I feel like 7 or 8 for IGN's review. Let's see what they got.
In his own words, Stellar Blade director Hyung-tae Kim is a visualist, not a storyteller. Meaning, whatever Stellar Blade lacks in its story, he's tried to make up for in its gameplay. It was a refreshingly transparent statement, and after playing through Stellar Blade, it's also one that I find mostly accurate. This is a gorgeous action game with excellent character and monster design, and exciting combat that continues to evolve in fun and interesting ways across the 30-hour adventure. Its story, light RPG elements, and the actual substance of its characters, on the other hand, fall well short of the high marks set by its combat. Stellar Blade certainly isn't pristine, and in some spots it's positively dull, but it's sharp in the areas that matter the most.
Those outfits are crazy.
Stellar Blade's setting is a familiar one. The Earth is a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and humans have fled to a colony in space. You play as Eve, a member of the 7th Airborne Squad, who is sent to the surface to eliminate the threat of the Natiba, horrific monsters that laid claim to Earth once the humans fled. What follows is a predictable tale that sees Eve linking up with the last remnants of human civilization and collecting 4 hypercores guarded by 4 big bosses, each of which comes with new revelations that answer the questions of what happened to the Earth, why the humans fled to space, what created the Natibas, and so on and so forth. None of the reveals were particularly surprising, and while the back half of the story is a little bit more interesting once all the cards are laid out on the table, any emotional moments fell flat for me because of a near complete lack of character building in the front half. And this is really the biggest issue with Stellar Blade's story. Its characters lack any kind of personality, charm, charisma, or anything that could have endeared me towards them in any sort of way.
Okay.
After 30 hours, I can barely tell you anything noteworthy about Eve, outside of the fact that she's fiercely dedicated to her mission, she's very close with her fellow 7th Airborne squad mate Taki, and she doesn't like getting wet.
I'd like to avoid getting wet.
We're never really given any sort of insight as to who she is as a character. She's got no sense of humor, and her interactions with her companions Adam and Lily are incredibly shallow. Those two don't fare much better either. Despite the fact that they act like they share a strong bond, it never feels believable because you never really see that bond being formed. Without any of that, it was hard to become invested in Eve, her mission, or Stellar Blade's world in general.
Interesting. I wonder if this will be a theme. Story, lack of character
Thankfully,
development.
the most important part of an action game is the action itself, and Stellar Blade checks pretty much all of the boxes when it comes to its combat. It's smoothly animated, challenging, satisfying, has a healthy amount of enemy variety, and while there's a lot of depth, it never became overwhelming in what it demanded of me. You could say that Stellar Blade's combat is derivative, but at the very least, it's derived from one of the best in Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Like Sekiro, it is very defense-driven. Enemies are prone to launching into long, uninterruptible combos, and the only way to properly deal with them is to precisely press the block button just before their attacks land to parry each attack one after the other.
Or perfect
Every parry
dodge.
you land takes away a point from the enemy's balance, and once their balance is broken, you're able to land a hugely damaging blow that will kill most standard enemies outright and deal massive damage to bosses. Unparryable attacks are clearly telegraphed with flashes of color. A yellow flash means an attack is straight up unblockable and needs to be dodged. A blue flash signals an attack that you can blink past by holding forward and dodging through the opponent to their backside,
Flash step.
and then a purple flash is the sign of an attack that can be repulsed, which forces you to hold back and press the dodge button at just the right time to deflect and expose the enemy's weak point. Once again, all of this is very similar to Sekiro's style of telegraphing unblockable moves that either must be jumped over, be Kiri countered, or avoided at all costs, and it works just as well here. Developer Shift Up smartly didn't settle for just straight up copying Sekiro's combat either. It adds its own twists in the form of beta skills, which are a series of 4 special attacks that Eve can use for specific purposes, including a wide sweeping attack that hits multiple enemies, a triple stab attack that does massive single target damage, a
Doesn't like
shockwave type
getting
move
wet.
that hits enemies at a distance,
She better
and
not
a
meet
shield
me
breaker
then.
that deals extra damage to an enemy's armor.
Am I
These
right?
attacks can be used by spending beta energy, which is gained by landing hits and parrying strikes. So you're well incentivized to engage with the enemy as opposed to just running away and sneaking in a hit when you can. Speaking
The
of those
bosses
enemies,
look
one of
crazy.
the areas in which Stellar Blade particularly excels in is its enemy variety and design. There are more than 48 different types of Natiba to fight against, and while some of them are only slight variations of each other with different weapons, at least those different weapons have their own combos and techniques that you need to learn in order to properly deal with them. Boss fights are great too, with intense battles against huge and aggressive monsters that always had me on the edge of my seat. Combat felt fresh all throughout the 30 hours it took me to beat it. Partially because of the aforementioned enemy variety, but also because at just about every major chapter in the campaign, I would get a new tool or mechanic that changed up how I approached certain encounters. There's a wrist-mounted drone that could fire a bunch of different ammo types from a distance, along with new mechanics like burst skills that added yet another layer of resource management and became critical for tough fights.
Ooh, that looks crazy.
Burst skills are similar to beta skills in that they are special attacks that require energy to use, but they are more powerful and typically result in an enemy being slumped on the ground. To balance that added strength, burst energy is much harder to build, requiring you to either perfectly dodge enemy attacks, successfully use a blink or repulse, or by spending a point of your beta energy to use a beta chain, which essentially exchanges the two resources. It was fun to make on-the-fly decisions about whether to spend 2 points of beta energy on a less powerful beta skill, or spend a single point to gain a point of burst energy and then use a much stronger attack later. It's considerations like these that really make some of the tougher bosses in Stellar Blade sing, not to mention the fact that the burst skills themselves just look cool as all hell.
Yeah, that's
The
insane.
cherry on top of all this excellent action is the exceptional soundtrack, which features everything from blood-pumping bangers during boss battles,
Yeah, the music goes crazy.
to beautiful, ear-tingling melodies while exploring its desolate world.
Bro, these outfits are incredible too. Holy. DMC combat.
When you're not hacking
Sekiro.
away at Stellar Blade's horrific-looking Neytima monstrosities, you'll be doing some light RPG activities like exploring Zion, mankind's last bastion of civilization, restocking at shops, changing your hair, picking up quick and light requests from a bulletin board, or taking on meteor side quests from NPCs. True to everything else in Stellar Blade, none of these tasks were particularly interesting from a storytelling perspective, save for one involving a man and his love for a broken-down singing android.
What? Is that so?
They do occasionally culminate in a big round 2 fight against a stronger version of a boss I had previously fought, but outside of those few moments, I quickly found myself tired of the side quest grind. First off, many of these side quests have you returning to old levels in order to reach a specific spot to either pick up some sort of note or item to deliver back to the quest giver. While this is mostly fine in the more open-ended zones where there's a map and numerous fast travel points to make travel much less of a chore, it is an absolute pain when it comes to the linear levels where you have nothing to guide you but a blip on your compass. Most of the time, virtually nothing has changed in these levels either, so it's literally just retracing your steps through the same level, minus any of the surprises you might have encountered on your first time through, all to collect a single item that you weren't able to pick up before. What makes this worse is that very rarely did I ever feel the effort was worth the trip. Most of the time, the rewards are just gold and EXP. EXP is great, as level ups give you skill points to explore more of Stellar Blade's well-developed
Guess why I gave it an 8?
But later on, which was when the side quest fatigue started to settle in, skill points were less exciting because the remaining upgrades were either skills I had passed on because I didn't really feel like I needed them, or they felt like very incremental stat increases on moves I didn't use very often, or were just extremely situational upgrades. Then there's gold, which for the most part is a useless currency in the latter half of the campaign. It's used pretty much exclusively for refilling consumables or getting more crafting components, which I practically never had to do because you find so many of all of those things just by opening treasure chests and breaking boxes. Thankfully, exploration fares much better. The 2 open zones of Stellar Blade aren't enormous, but they are densely packed with hidden collectibles and fun enemy encounters that always made me want to thoroughly explore as much as possible.
So far, this sounds pretty
before
fair.
making a break for the objective.
But we'll see what the final
there
score
are
is.
collectible cans that can be returned to your base for a variety of rewards, core parts that increase your max health and energy, robot loot pinatas that contain all sorts of goodies, exoskeletons that greatly affect your stats and can affect your approach to combat, and of course 30 or so outfits that you can use to change Eve's appearance. There is an impressive variety among those costumes. So for every skimpy swimsuit or super tiny miniskirt, there's also a classy dress or stylish outfit that makes Eve look like, as my wife puts it, an insta-baddie. I always look forward to finding a new skin.
Insta-baddie
And
is accurate.
It's very satisfying to have another big action game outside of Insomniac's Spider-Man series that features really high quality unlockable cosmetics that you don't have to purchase with real money microtransactions. One other feather in Stellar Blade's cap is that it mixes up its gameplay fairly well. Occasionally, you'll have to go deep underground into a creepy lab where your scanner and sword don't work, turning it into a genuinely spooky survival horror style game. There are also some cool Uncharted-like action sequences, as well as a good mix of linear and non-linear level design. Not all of these breaks from combat hit, and the platforming heavy sections are particularly annoying whenever they come up, but they nonetheless do a good job of relieving the monotony that would come from just going fight to fight with nothing in between. After beating Stellar Blade, it's also worth mentioning that there's no New Game Plus at launch. It will be coming down the line as free DLC, but right out of the gate, there's not much waiting for you at the end beyond a hard mode that doesn't really seem to change much outside of the enemies hitting you harder. This is especially frustrating because once you beat the game, your save file with all of your unlockables, costumes, and other collectibles is basically stuck at the final boss fight. You can't take those costumes over with you to a new game, forcing you to do an entirely fresh playthrough outside of one new costume that you get for beating the game, and you can't even skip cutscenes on your subsequent playthroughs.
Yeah, definitely gonna want that New Game Plus when it comes out.
Stellar Blade stands out as a gorgeous and well-crafted action game with very impressive strengths and very clear weaknesses. Both its story and characters lack substance, and some of its RPG elements are poorly implemented, like dull side quests that very often force you to retrace your steps through previous levels, with very little done to make the return trip feel unique or rewarding. but its action picks up most of that slack thanks to the rock-solid fundamentals of its Sekiro-inspired combat system, a deep well of hideous monstrosities to sharpen your sword against, and plenty of hidden goodies that do a great job of incentivizing exploration all throughout.
7, right on the. I was right on that, right on the money.
For more Stellar Blade, check out the first minutes of the game.
I said 7 or 8 from IGN. Yep, so right on the money. So this one is from Rurikhan. It's a 45-minute review. That's crazy. But he loved it.
What we let inspire us and what we pay homage to says a lot about the creations we make. Stellar Blade's influences come from the last generation of character action
I don't know about that.
And it wields them proudly, channeling not just ideas but themes.
If you're a fan of culture,
even stylistic flourishes from games like Bayonetta,
then yeah, I see this as a 10 out of 10.
It is only through understanding where Stellar Blade comes from that one can begin to discern what it improves upon and where it falls short of the giants that developer Shift Up's title wishes to stand on the shoulders of.
This definitely seems like an 8 out of 10.
Stellar Blade puts you in control of Eve, a human arriving at a far-flung future Earth riddled with monsters known as Natibas.
This definitely feels like an 8 out of 10 game.
Superhuman powers, having been raised on a
Give
space
this game a double D.
and trained specifically to free what few survivors remain on the planet from the oppression of this omnipresent and existential threat.
We do have engineering support from the airborne squad.
What? Is that so?
Along the way, the story takes a few twists and turns.
I think how high you rate this
stays in the realm of pulp
is going to determine how much you value combat in an action game,
one up itself. Characters change motives
and how much you appreciate
twists at a drop of a hat,
culture,
and then resume their previous mindset without acknowledgement or comment. There are times that you may wish the writing showed a bit more self-restraint rather than feel like the first season of a TV show throwing a Hail Mary for a second. The weight of the inconsistent quality of its writing tilts heavier towards Stellar Blade's disadvantage, as occasional head-scratching side quests are followed up by decidedly compelling ones, though not as often as it should. Just as you feel fatigued with following waypoints, the game serves a side quest with unique content and boss fights, or a narrative beyond just looking for someone who it turned out is already dead. The main story grazes the surface of subject matter like transhumanism and moral relativity, but it does little with them. Stilted and stiff voice acting also does little to help you take the story seriously, and often brings you out of it.
Lovely to meet you.
You don't seem very likable.
All right.
Historically, the quality of
the music
a character
goes so
action
crazy.
Story has scarcely mattered to the overall package, but those expecting something above the genre average should readjust expectations. Where Stellar Blade does shine is in its moment-to-moment gameplay, be they running full speed down the slope of a desert dune or fighting a cockroach monster that leaps out at Eve from behind a box. It's all genuinely quite fun. Eve is generally given a mission that involves her, a fair amount of dynamic set pieces, and a large number of monsters, and that formula is successful more often than not. There are a handful of missteps among these moments, jumping sections, occasional puzzles that task Eve with playing a arcade-like pipe connecting game, a keypad variation on Simon Says, or a long Sonic-like tunnel surfing segment that either do not synchronize with the game's inherent floatiness or feel like diversions that never end, but it understands its own strengths most of the time.
Yeah, we watched the IGN review first.
Gameplay is bolstered by an interesting and exciting combat system that leans heavily on parries and dodges as its core foundation. Far from a combo fest, Stellar Blade puts meat on the bones by feeding all your actions in battle into ultra powerful special moves. Surviving through deflecting an attack or dodging out of the way does more than keep your life bar intact, as it cranks up the dial of the moves you can use to respond when you're fully given the frame of opportunity. Defeat at the hands of an enemy can rarely be attributed to a surprise attack or a pattern that defies reaction time. but rather a lesson in understanding how it moves and how to employ your myriad of options in response. Dying in combat suggests an invitation to come back armed with knowledge you did not possess the last time you crossed that threshold. The larger issue, and what keeps Stellar Blade from surpassing its well-known muses, is that Shift Up's title does not demonstrate a particularly learned display of pacing. This is not to say that Stellar Blade is too short. For a genre, it sits on the higher end of hour counts. The problem is that individual sections of the game are entirely too long. Nearly every door you need to go through is locked or underpowered, leading to a detour to find the key or press the switch that opens the door you hoped to go through ages ago, making it a rarefied occasion when you do simply just walk through the path you expected.
Let's come back later. We have things to do.
In that sense, it is often like Stellar Blade wants to have its pacing both ways. On one hand, the game is constantly pushing you in a direction that feels like progression from a top-down perspective. On the other hand,
maybe, but they gave it a 7 out of 10.
Game's enemies feel like genuine threats that can destroy Eve in one strong combo, and by contrast, they take a fair number of special moves and attacks to finally rout. But by putting so many of them between you and the objective, those little moment-to-moment instances of fun begin to feel unwieldy and slightly tedious when stacked on top of each other. When the only real punishment for death is retreading the same combat-filled path once again, at some point, that feels punitive enough. The game's structure sometimes allows for you to make your own pacing by completing missions largely centered in the game's open fields. While large, these areas mostly funnel you down existing paths, regardless of whether or not you can imagine a more creative trail. Most frustratingly, there are only
if IGN hated it, they would have gave it a 5.
Both are themed after deserts.
Or a 6.
One subtropical, one semi-arid, meaning a prime opportunity
they had to restrain
for variety
themselves.
is wasted. Moreover, the cutoff for side quests is surprisingly early in the game and explicitly warned to you, meaning you have to pack a lot of these missions in when they would feel better spread out over a longer period of time. A mitigating factor for that occasional tiresomeness is the game's soundtrack, which consists of banger after banger. Cruising through the desert doing submissions for hours feels almost zen-like when accompanied by the soft interjections of a vocalist's crooning.
Yeah, the soundtrack goes hard.
Boss fights run the gamut from heavy metal to pop, all making appropriate auroral partners to the sound
sure
of
made it sound
steel
like they just liked it.
clashing against steel.
I don't know. We watched the full
Stellar Blade
review,
can often impress graphically,
and
between giant
the reviewer
set pieces
sounded
that dazzle
pretty
to
fair.
rather stunning character models. The NPCs were clearly prioritized in different categories, with some
there wasn't the
looking like
usual
moving
IGN
plastic dolls,
nonsense
and others reusing bits and pieces
where they
of the
find like
otherwise
random stuff to hate
prominent
on,
characters.
or
The
just say
main
something
cast
just ridiculous.
generally impresses in both fidelity and animation.
Thank you.
They love the
While Stellar
graphics,
Blade's
the combat,
non-linear
the
areas
music.
offer little in the way of environmental variety, the main story
They didn't like the
stretches
story and the
itself
character
a
development.
little bit further. The game as a whole, barring a last-minute jaunt into a visually exciting new frontier, tends to take place in the ruined buildings and the tunnels beneath them. The post-apocalyptic setting allowed Shift Up to create any combination of elements and ambiance they wanted, so it is disappointing to delve into samey tunnels so often. A globe-trotting adventure in the middle of a sci-fi world should inspire awe, but Stellar Blade only manages this with its environments in rare instances. While exploring, you will also find mountains of loot from both treasure chests and enemy drops, but it never gets overwhelming. The vast majority of collectible items are resources given to various shopkeepers, with the occasional equipment drop hoping to fit your playstyle. Each equipable spine or gear can slightly
We need to get the
alter
Stellar
way
Blade
you plays, but
soundtrack
nothing
on
makes
on
such a
Spotify.
dramatic difference that stats are completely unignorable. If you wish to not bother with them or only care about a bigger number, Stellar Blade is happy to oblige. Stellar Blade has a dreamlike quality in a way, which shouldn't be misinterpreted as saying everything about it is fantastic. Rather, it is like one of those half-remembered dreams that sticks in the back of your mind the entire day. You recall vague details, a collapsing train yard, a ruined opera house, an Asian garden, and forget the blips in between. I came away from Stellar Blade having enjoyed the game quite a bit despite its foibles on the back of its incredibly strong systems. That its biggest weakness is that its tribulations can go on too long is perhaps praise from another perspective, not my own. There is a nagging question though that sticks in the back of my mind. Does this game rise to the heights its inspirers achieved? The conclusion I came to is no, but that it attempts so without falling on its face is remarkable enough.
The GameSpot gives it an 8. Soundtrack goes crazy. Yeah, so right now, Subblade is at an 81 based on 68 critic scores. Yeah, about the range I was expecting. Yeah, I knew there was zero chance this would get in the 9s. There was zero chance of that happening. Let me see. So I got a 9 out of 10 from CO Connected, Malditos. Looks like so far the lowest score came from the website The Video Gamer. Where they gave it a 60. So far, 88% positive, 10% mixed, and 0% negative. Yeah, so I think Stellar Blade will settle in to the 82 to 84, 82 to 85 range. And we'll probably score close to a 90 on the user score, I'm guessing. And I think it's going to have really strong sales. Watch IGN. That was the first video we watched. We watched IGN first, and then we watched GameSpot. So I think that's a W. Sony still has enough clout where, as a game publishing site, you do not want to be in a situation where you're trashing Sony games for a Sony game for no reason. The Fextra Life got early access. They got to do a review. Fighting Cowboy, certified banger. All right, let's watch the Fighting Cowboys review.
Stellar Blade is finally here, and with it, a lot of people want to know how things will stack up when taking a look at Shift Up's first foray into the console gaming space. Now, this is a dev that previously has only been known for the mobile game
I don't have it
Goddess
yet.
of Victory Nike, which is primarily about jiggle physics and girls shooting guns. And while there is lots of jiggle physics in Stellar Blade, and it's primarily what the online discussion surrounding the game has been about, there's actually a lot to dive into with this action RPG, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in today's review. So this review is based on beating the entire game. I've achieved multiple endings at this point and sunken More hours than I would like to admit, considering I plan on jumping back into it with hard mode. But regardless, let's jump in and talk about the game today. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is going to be the gameplay, because that is typically the most important thing to me when I'm playing a game. And especially as a newcomer to the console gaming space, I really think Shift Up absolutely nailed it here. You have a very, very nice combination of flashy combat, something you might expect out of, say, Bayonetta or Devil May Cry. You have a lot of the precision on the dodges and parries, which were very reminiscent of Sekiro for me. And honestly, the way it all kind of weaves together almost gives off a God of War type feel. So especially for a dev that's brand new in the AAA type gaming space, the console gaming space, I saw this as an absolute victory in terms of how the gameplay flowed. Looking at previews, there was also a lot of gunplay that was shown, which actually ends up having a surprisingly significant amount of usage within the game. It's not just some gimmick that you never end up seeing. I would use the guns to pop off enemies that were far away. There were sections of the game that were entirely gun focused. And so it's nice to see that they took these systems and ended up pulling them all together, as opposed to, the gun just being a side thought or an afterthought, if you will. But diving deep into the combat and talking about what makes it click. So the first thing is probably going to be the tightness of the parries and the dodge timing for the game. Now, with that on the upgrades, I think a lot of people were saying that it felt incredibly tight. And early on, a lot of people actually said that the parry timings felt off. And there were some early reports that this was, VRR related or HDCP related.
Need to be a 90.
I never personally felt
for sure.
that, but throughout playing the game, I did get the parry upgrade. It was one of the first things.
Stellar Blade is definitely not in contention for Game of the Year, for sure. First of all, it should be based on just look at these outfits. Holy. But yeah, in order to get even a nomination in the Game of the Year category, if you look at the games that they nominate, they all have bare minimum 90 on Metacritic score. Spider-Man 2 just snuck in there at a 90. If you have less than a 90, you're not getting nominated for Game of the Year. That's just not happening. And I was never expecting Stellar Blade to get that high.
As I got, and throughout the game, there were very few enemies that I struggled to obtain parry timings against. And going back to what I said previously, this is one of the only games besides Sekiro where I actually felt that
I think they're much more concerned with the sales, though.
Multi-parries and being able to execute timings and follow that rhythm of the combat. And that's something that I
think they'll be okay with
very,
solid
very
reviews. 80,
now,
80,
even for those players that aren't
out
as
of 10,
parry-centric or just struggle with timings,
and really high sales,
perfect dodge is a completely alternative option that is also very viable. One of the nice things is parries and dodges have different follow-up attacks you can do. Some of them are more single target focused, some of them are more AoE focused, some of them are repositioning, like it'll put you behind the enemy. So there's a lot of flexibility in the play style. And then even on more the action side of things, we have a pretty in-depth combat system with the various combos we can do, chaining up to like a 3-hit, a 4-hit, a 5-hit. And the stronger combo you go, obviously, the more damage you're going to be capable of. Now, one of the interesting things about the flow of the combat here is it does follow almost a my turn, your turn type system, where if you're trying to run through an entire combo chain and, say, juggle somebody like you would in Devil May Cry, unless you're utilizing certain mechanics, you're not going to be able to pull that off. Instead, you might need to get through a 3-hit combo and then transition to trying to get dodges and parries as the enemy starts attacking. But after you stagger them, you can then follow up with your combo once again. And going back to what I just said a moment ago, if you do utilize mechanics such as staggers and knockdowns, you are able to chain combos even longer and effectively lock larger enemies down, including bosses, for extended periods of time, which is something that I was really fond of as I was playing. Outside of the combo play, we have a variety of different special abilities we're able to do, and the demo actually gave people a really good look at a lot of these. Obviously, in the full game, we had a chance to dive into those 2 other skill trees that weren't available in the demo, getting to play with another set of abilities and something we'll just call super mode, which ends up beefing you up. All of your abilities get stronger, and you have a ton of energy for a short duration. But so when you pull all this together, you end up having combat that I found incredibly satisfying. In terms of combat scale, I would put this right next to Sekiro, God of War 2018, God of War Ragnarok. This is one of those games where if you are looking for satisfying combat, I think you're going to feel incredibly at home with
Very,
Stellar Blade.
very agree.
Now, moving
based
on
on the
from there,
demo.
I want to take a moment to talk about the story, and while I won't be going into spoilers at all, I do want to say that I did end up enjoying the story a lot more than I thought I would. Going into this, I thought it was going to be very much like a discount Nier type vibe. You know, we have the soldiers coming down from space, and the planet is overtaken by baddies, and you know, the last bastion of humanity, and you're fighting against these things. There's definitely a lot of similarities going on to Nier, in particular Nier Automata, and I think that was only exacerbated by the music because of the fact that Okabe-san's group, the composer who worked on the music for Nier, was also involved with this game, eliciting very similar vibes as you're exploring the world and whatnot. But I don't think the Nier comparisons are necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think you could almost describe the story here as a simple man's Nier to an extent. It's not going to end up hitting the same big philosophical notes that I think Nier Automata sought to achieve, but the story was very enjoyable. Like I said, there were some very good twists that I did not see coming. We're not going to be talking about the endings, but the game does have multiple endings that do include different bosses, which is also something that I was very appreciative of. I think that's a risk that not a lot of devs take. You know, we saw it in Sekiro with the Owl route versus the Ishin route, and that was something really cool, that depending on the path you take, you're going to get not only completely different endings, but different final bosses, very different experiences. And so it was very cool to see something like that here. Because,
That's dope.
as I mentioned, that's just a risk that a lot of devs don't want to take. And
They mentioned
essence,
that in the
you're
IGN
creating
review.
content that a large chunk of your player base may never even experience. And despite that, I think it paid off incredibly well here, and it was something that I enjoyed a lot of. Talking a little bit about the level design and the world design, I think you could probably group it up into three main buckets. We had areas that were more structured but slightly open, kind of how we saw in the demo, that did elicit some Souls-like vibes where you're going through and there's certain enemies that are going to try and ambush you in groups of enemies that are very carefully placed. We had the open world type areas, which were obviously very broad, enemies all over the place, different objectives all over that you could do. And then we had the gun zones, where you were in a basically underground type area, and you were limited to only using your firearm, and in a sense, almost giving a Resident Evil type vibe as you're, you know, more of a horror type game as you're going through those areas. And while those three areas ended up repeating a couple different times, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. The three various zones were all enjoyable, even though the gun area was a little bit unexpected. I wouldn't say it was bad. It was just a very different vibe from being on the surface and utilizing, you know, your perfect parries and dodges and running through all your abilities, and suddenly you're in this almost horror game type setting. Thankfully, those sections were probably the shortest of them, though. So if you're worried about, you know, all of a sudden the game turning into Resident Evil, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. But all three of the areas were a lot of fun to play. And just to clarify, when I say three areas, I don't mean there's only three areas of the game, but these are the three main buckets that the gameplay seems to fall into. In general, the areas that were more structured, like what we saw in the demo, I think were where I ended up enjoying myself the most. The open world areas, there was certainly a lot to do, and then in particular, there were a lot of very dynamic puzzles that you could find in the open world areas, but especially going through on a Let's Play, there were times where I felt a bit overwhelmed just trying to find everything and solve every puzzle, and I felt as if this would have been something that probably would have better been done if I was just on stream or chilling on a couch and relaxing, whereas the structured areas were a lot easier to run through and make sure I wasn't missing any treasure or anything. So very different vibes going on, but I do think that provides a bit of diversity to the game itself. In terms of locale, the locales were, I would say, pretty limited. We have kind of the destroyed city type thing going on. We have a rocky wasteland going on. We have a desert going on. But with a game like this, you're not really going to see a huge locale variety. And I think that's okay. I don't think this is really intended to be a open world game on the scale of, you know, say Horizon or Dragon's Dogma, where biome diversity is something that players are going to be more concerned about. As this is a more singular experience, I think this post-apocalyptic setting actually ends up working pretty well here. But talking about the various activities available to do in the world, aside from following the main quest, once we end up reaching the central hub or the main city of the game, there are
These
a bunch
outfits
of
are
NPC
kind of
side quests
bro.
that become available, and more become available as we continue.
Suicide
the story.
Squad
Besides that, we also
desperately
have
definitely
a
need some of
mission
these
board structure
type of
where you
outfits
can
for
pick up,
Harley.
I guess more busy work.
That would make
quests,
so
like
much more
kill
money.
X amount of enemies, or find this particular item, or catch this fish. The mission board quests are all very straightforward. I would typically knock out 4
Obviously,
or 5 of those anytime I went on out.
the
And those
shift up
generally just
devs
rewarded gold that you
have
could spend
very
on stuff
different
in the game.
philosophies.
The more appropriate side quests,
We'll say,
like the actual side quests where you
than
went over and talked to
Rocksteady.
somebody and accepted it. These were usually giving you more tangible rewards, whether they be new outfits, new exospine, new gear, usually things that were going to have a larger impact on either your appearance or the gameplay itself. So I thought that was a very nice mix-up. And in terms of the total amount of content, my first playthrough clocked in right around 35 hours. This was with doing pretty much everything I could find. I had one side quest that I hadn't finished because it involved finding rather obscure treasures. But besides that, I did a ton of the content. I ended up getting the full ending, I guess we could call it. And so I had a really good time for that amount of time. I think someone that's trying to just kind of beeline the story, not really focusing on side content, you could probably get through the game in 15 to 20 hours, depending on your skill level. And someone that's going for a more completionist approach, trying to find all the collectibles, all of the outfits, stuff like that, you're probably looking more into the 40 to 50 hour range, I would say.
Pretty good.
I know that's kind of a large window, but some of the collectibles are incredibly well hidden. So, if you're following a guide, obviously things would be much shorter. But all in all, for a single player experience, clocking at 35 hours, I think that's right around the sweet spot. I think lately in particular, we've had a lot of games kind of pushing much longer, going for that 50 plus hours, 70, 100 hours. And, not every game needs to be that long. In fact, I'm glad not every game is that long. So a more concise, polished experience that's like right at that 35-hour mark, that's perfect in my opinion. I was very satisfied with how long it was. One thing I will say, and that I wish the game had New Game Plus right now. I know they mentioned they're working on it, but that was one thing I was a little bummed about. Obviously, I'm not going to docket points in the review, but getting through the game and then going to start hard mode and seeing like you lose everything. You were starting over with nothing. You are back to no upgrades, no consumables, no money, no nothing. That was a little bit of a gut punch. But they did say they're working on New Game Plus, so it's definitely something. I think I would end up enjoying this a lot, playing through on New Game Plus with like all my goodies unlocked. But that's beyond the point. So moving on from there, let's talk about sound design and music. So sound design in particular, I think, is very well done in this game. The sound of the swords clanging, the sounds of battle, the sounds of the parries and whatnot, all of those were very, very well done. There is kind of a combat shout that Eve tends to do a lot, and especially if you're doing a more ability spam centric build, it gets a bit overbearing at times just because as you're spamming your abilities. She's like, hiya, 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 and you're like, okay, I get it. You can calm down. And it's definitely noticeable. I wouldn't say it's a huge negative, but I would have liked to see a couple more combat lines for that. But the actual sound itself, I think the sound design was done very well. Music in particular also done incredibly well. This is the type of game where, spending a little bit of extra to pick up the soundtrack is wholly worth it. I think the soundtrack here, they did a phenomenal job. Whereas a lot of games tend to be a bit more safe in their soundtrack, I think there was a good variety here. You had the tracks that were very reminiscent of Nier, that were, kind of more like relaxing, like you could put it on and just lay in bed with your eyes closed and probably fall asleep to it. And then you had like the hardcore, rock tracks that are going on during battles. And then there was even like a K-pop song during one battle that I just did not expect whatsoever. But big variety of music. And probably the most important thing is that the music is very, very good. Like right now, in terms of music design for this year, this and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth would absolutely be the top games for music score. Like no question about it. Nothing else is coming remotely close to the music that this and Rebirth have done so far. So if you're a audiophile, I think you're going to find yourself very satisfied with this game. Talking about visuals, so I ended up playing the game on balanced mode, which is mostly a upscaled 4K, aiming to achieve a 60 FPS. The game does run very, very well. There were occasional areas where I could tell that I would dip just a little bit. In particular, those were usually more in the open world zones or fights that had a ton of different particle effects going on. But for the most part, I would say you're looking at a stable 60 on balanced. The game also does offer a performance mode as well as a graphics mode, which targets 30. In general, I think balance seemed to be a pretty good sweet spot because I do like my higher quality visuals that come along with 4K, but obviously in a game like this, having a consistent frame rate as close to 60 as possible is going to make things just that much smoother in terms of pulling off those precision parries or the precision dodges. But the visuals themselves, I think the game did a beautiful job. Textures look good in the game, outfits look good, Eve looks great, enemies are incredibly grotesque with flesh and teeth and, spines and bones sticking out all over them. I think the enemy design was pretty gnarly looking, but one that I ended up being quite fond of here. I like grotesque monster type things. So a very big fan of that there. In terms of the visuals and the world design, the one area that did kind of leave me going, was the Great Desert. There's a long desert zone.
Along as a game,
there are large swathes of it that are just kind of
it's going to be around
35
hours.
A little bit of pop-in as you're just kind of cruising through the desert. You would just see enemies pop up because, it's a huge desert that goes on for miles. So I do think that's just, kind of comes with the territory there.
15 to
but
20.
in general, I would say the visuals
if you
for this were
mainly
good.
skip
Definitely
all the side
something that
content.
I was incredibly satisfied with. In terms of complaints,
40 to 50,
really not a lot that I found.
If you try to
wrong with the game.
100%
One thing
everything.
that did stand out to me, though, is as you collect items that would go over your limit, like heals that you couldn't carry or whatnot, they would just get kind of vacuumed into your inventory, and they would refresh anytime you ended up resting at a check spot. This did not apply with ammo, however. To get ammo, you either had to find it in the world or buy it. So occasionally I would hit chest, and it would spit out a bunch of ammo, and I was full, and then it just had to sit there on the ground. And that's something that very much bothered me. I'm just like, this feels very wasteful from a loot perspective. Besides that, another thing that stood out is looking at the upgrades, the exo spines, and those are kind of like your build defining type items. A lot of those can be very well hidden throughout the game, so I think a lot of players could end up feeling fairly limited in their playstyle approach. And I want to be clear, obviously, your core playstyle of your attacks and your specials and all that's going to be available to everybody, but the exo spines can very drastically change how your character plays. You can take a heavier stealth focus, a heavier range focus, an emphasis around your beta energy abilities, an emphasis around combo play. And so I think those should have been a bit more upfront, because there's even like a trophy for upgrading 10 of them. And I think in my playthrough, I only ended up having around 9 at the end. So there's definitely, I would assume, at least one more, but probably more than that one. And they're pretty well hidden considering how well I went through it. But overall, very, very minor complaints here. In terms of the balance mode, there were a couple little visual artifacts when you're looking at like terraces and fences, especially in that desert zone I was talking about, just kind of trying to create that texture, but putting it against a certain background. It would get a little fuzzy at times, but these are incredibly minor nitpicks. And to be honest, there's not much to really complain about here. All in all, this is an easy 5 out of 5 for me. I had an absolute blast playing this. As I kind of mentioned back towards the start, I think this is probably the first game since Sekiro for me that's really just kind of hit those check boxes on the combat where it really, really clicks. And like, obviously I love the combat in God of War, but the multi-parries in Sekiro and kind of that rhythm of battle that captured me so much in Sekiro is very much alive and well in Stellar Blade if you choose to interact with it. And I think very few games achieve that well. I know Lies of P tried to do it. I personally don't think the parry in Lies of P was very good. I ended up thinking it was kind of oddly timed and clunky, and
Outfit's definitely 10 out
really
of 10.
Felt the multi parries worked that well in that game, but here they feel phenomenal. Like I said, it felt, somebody that is a huge fan of Sekiro and has platinumed the game and done everything that game had to offer, hitting the timings for parries and perfect dodges here, I felt right at home and had a blast with it. So yeah, this is an easy 5 out of 5 for me. If you're a fan of action games, I think this is going to absolutely resonate with you. And honestly, the biggest thing is the fact that this is a brand new IP from Shift Up, a company that has never done a console game before. They're in the Korean market is primarily dominated by mobile games, and they have a mobile title that's found success. So seeing them branch out and do something like this, which is not what I would have expected at all, and then on top of it, the fact that the game is an absolute banger, like, fucking kudos, man. That's impressive to me. If this had, like, I would expect a game at this level to come from a more veteran studio. So yeah, wholehearted recommendations here. If you're excited for this, I think you're gonna feel very happy with your purchase. No microtransactions. There's obviously a deluxe edition upgrade, but they said in the future, if they end up adding content, it would be paid content. But since, micros are the thing everyone wants to talk about, no, there's no micros in the game at launch. There's just the deluxe edition purchase, and that's it. But either way, that's going to wrap things up for me.
All right, so IGN gave it a 7 out of 10. GameSpot gave it an 8 out of 10. Fighting Cowboy content creator gave it a 5 out of 5. He loved the game. And if we check the current Metacritic score, Stellar Blade is sitting at an 82 out of 100 based on now 97 critic scores. So about even, I think that's where Helldivers actually ended up, around 82, at least on console. Yeah, so 82, that's 2 points above Lies of P as well. I'll be very interested to see what the user scores end up being. I have a feeling that the Stellar Blade user scores are going to be pretty high relative to the critic score. Just the feeling that I have. Critic scores are solid. You'll definitely take 8 out of 10, 82, especially since I think this game is going to sell extremely well. But I think the user score is going to be substantially higher than the critic score. Is my prediction. I predicted the Metacritic score would be like in the 82 to 87 range, and that's about where it ended up. I mean, you'll definitely take that though for a game developer who mostly known for mobile games. This is their first console game, and on top of that, they waded into the culture war unintentionally. So they have that battle to fight against, and they're still coming out with a 82 so far. Yeah, I think this is going to be a hit for Sony. Yeah, I predict the Metacritic score is going to fall under. I doubt it'll go to past 85, but I think the user score is probably going to be closer to 90, maybe even above 90. That's where I'm guessing the user score is going to end up being. So, congrats to Shift Up. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it. I've really enjoyed the Stellar Blade demo. I played a lot of it. I'm looking forward to the full game. I didn't get a review copy. The review copies went out, I think a couple weeks ago, but I should still get an early copy, so I should be able to cover the game at least a day early. I'll let you guys know. I'll be live I'll be live playing it, so be on lookout for that. Appreciate you hanging out with me this morning. Congrats once again to Shift Up. Definitely looks like Stellar Blade is going to be a W, especially if you appreciate culture. We saw some of these outfits. If that's your thing, you're definitely going to want to buy this game immediately. But if you're just really into combat, you're a big fan of Sekiro, I highly recommend the game as well. So I'll catch y'all hopefully tomorrow. I'm Sadot the Gamer signing out.